Matt, I'll set it up this way. We were sitting here a year ago, roughly, with Texas, Oklahoma, and there were a lot of crazy notions out there, and one of them was USC, UCLA to the Big Ten.
Well, I recall, I don't remember the precise date, but we have one of our live shows about a month ago, maybe like 4 weeks ago here on the Voice of College Football, and the topic came up, would USC leave the Pac-12? And I firmly told you no, because George Kliavkoff's done a great job. He clearly did everything he could to put USC in a much better position to succeed. Right after the Pac-12 championship game formatting adjustment, removing USC from the constraint of having to win the Pac-12 South, you do it the top 2 model that the Big 12 uses. Like, that was just like a very tangible demonstration of, hey, I want USC football to have a maximum chance of succeeding, of doing well, of competing for the Pac-12 championship, of representing the Pac-12 in the college football playoff, in the Rose Bowl. So George Kliavkoff did absolutely everything he could in 1 year. That's the other thing. He had only 1 year on the job, and one would have to think that when Texas and Oklahoma made the move to the SEC last July, Kliavkoff was on the job for just a couple weeks. So if USC and UCLA had made their mind up then to make the move to the Big Ten, there's nothing George Kliavkoff could have done to prevent that from happening. And obviously, this raises the larger point that Larry Scott just spoiled everything in the Pac-12, just ruined the conference's brand and reputation and its media rights value on so many levels that USC felt dissatisfied enough that, hey, when we get an opportunity, when the chessboard changes, and Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC was precisely that change, so this was very much brewing for a while. There's nothing George Kliavkoff could have done to stop it, and he proved that he wanted USC football to do well. You can't lay any of this at his feet. This was what Larry Scott failed to do, and there's really a bitter irony in all of this, isn't there? Because the Pac-12 at the start of Larry Scott's tenure wanted Texas and Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, and the Pac-12 presidents shot that down. Now, of course, Texas did get cold feet, so it's not as though the Pac-12 presidents were the last thing standing in the way of that move, but they did stand in the way of that move. And everything could have been different. We could have had a Pac-16 with Texas and Oklahoma in the fold, and now Texas and Oklahoma going instead to the SEC creates the impetus for USC to leave the Pac-12 and possibly kill the conference. And so Larry Scott's failure over a decade ago initiates a decade-long series of events in which George Kliavkoff is left holding the bag through absolutely no fault of his own.
It's remarkable. I know that fans don't necessarily care about this, but I'm just thinking logistics. So we have seen the geography of college football stretched. This is completely just stretched it to the nth degree and torn it apart. We're going coast to coast now. Rutgers, as Tony alluded to, Rutgers in Maryland to Los Angeles and back and forth. And everybody's thinking football. They play once a year. They don't have to play every year. They play, some of these teams in the conference will play once every 4 years. Talking about every sport. We're talking about sports that play long schedules, baseball schedules of 50 and 55 games and 20, 30 game conference schedules in a baseball season and all these Olympic sports. And yes, there are I've seen several comments. We've got airplanes.
If I could jump in on that, there's a point, and again, I'm getting into the granular and digging deep and beyond what's on the surface. I actually think that this financially ends some of the Olympic sports. I don't think you're going to be able to continue to finance them when you've got to ship them cross country, non-revenue sport. They're going to get reduced to something other than what they currently are, because if we take this on the assumption that it's about money and they're going to get this piece of the fantastic Big Ten TV contract, which we're going to assume is better than what the Pac-12 will be getting 2 years from now. It's still only going to go so far because your expenses are going to go up tremendously. We joke about the travel, but you bring up a good point, Mark, in that we're talking about a baseball team going and having a 3-game weekend series in College Park, and then, having to come back and then going to Champaign or, wherever. And it's the expense of this is extraordinary, regardless of what the new TV revenue will be.
And to extend on that point, Tony, as you both well know and could explain better than I, the Pac-12 has done a masterful job of shrinking the conference geographically by smartly scheduling and allowing teams to travel and then stay and pick off at least the 2 teams within that state, regardless of the sport. But if you're going to do that as USC and UCLA, when the rest of the conference is on the other side of the country, you're going to basically live playing Maryland and Penn State and Rutgers for a month. And some of these athletes are going to be like, I signed and took a scholarship to actually live in Los Angeles and play sports in
Right.
Southern California, not live in
Right.
the East Coast for months at a time.
No, look, I think that's a great point. And it's, if you're an athlete, and I see someone here, if I'm looking at the screen correctly, Nate, saying that if you're a UCLA women's volleyball player flying the entire way across country multiple times, is not what you signed up for. You've got, look, they still have to go to classes, whether we want to admit it or not, whether people want to acknowledge student athletes or whether they're really just athletes. This makes the student part of it tremendously hard. And it's, you can't maintain the conference, as I was saying earlier, you can't maintain the conference as is without UCLA and USC football, and basketball for that matter. You just can't. The rest of the conference can't financially sustain itself.
There's one bitter irony in all this. And Tony, I was brought on early enough to hear that you are living in North Carolina. So old time ACC country. So you can definitely identify with this next point. Lefty Driesell, when he built Maryland in the 1970s, what did he say? He said he wanted to create the UCLA of the East.
Right.
And now Maryland and UCLA can play each other in the same conference.
Right. It's just,
insane.
It is. And I think, because having grown up on the West Coast and watching all this for so many decades, the Pac-12 always did a good job with the travel partner model, right? Especially with basketball, especially when it was the Pac-10 and you were just playing the other 9 opponents. USC and UCLA both go down to Arizona. One plays Arizona, one plays ASU. They flip. You go back home. And it really worked very well. I mean, frankly, it was one of the most perfect models you could ask for. Going to 12 teams kind of messed that up a little bit, but you have to wonder, look, I don't think if this does happen, and all indications are that it will, it's not the end. Other teams will leave. It will also, and I can tell you out here, from conversations, I had an interview with John Curry, the athletic director at Wake Forest, about 3 weeks ago. He was very gracious, sat down with us for 45 minutes for a one-on-one, no topics off the table. And we talked about conference moving, because I said, there's going to be more. There just has to be. This isn't it. And he said, there is going to be more, and we don't know what it's going to look like. He said, but if you've been in this long enough, you know that this happens routinely. If you're old enough, you remember the Southwest Conference and the Big 8 and the Pac-8 and things like that. My issue to him now was, but we're really headed towards 2 conferences. We're really headed towards a Big 10 with 20 teams, an SEC with 20 teams, and other schools on the outside looking in, in smaller conferences.